If you're looking for a new type of activity with a touch of retro in it, try building a classic stick and tissue paper airplane. Guillows is the biggest manufacturer of these, and this is a good example, the Piper Super Cub 95. This particular version has been around since, believe it or not, 1961, and I actually built one of these 50 years ago. You can get them from Amazon.com, anywhere from $10 to $19, depending on who's selling them and which model you get. There are about a dozen different airplanes that you can build, so you can select the one you want. Depending on your level of skill and determination, you can put one of these together in as little as 3 hours, or it may take you as long as 10. Now, of course, the actual time will be a little bit longer than that because after you glue a section together, you have to let the glue dry. What I'm going to do in this video is not present a detailed instruction on how to assemble this particular model. They actually go together quite simply. It's rather like building a puzzle, and I'll explain that in a second. You just snap the pieces together, apply some glue, let it dry, cover it with paper, and you're done. It is, of course, a little bit more involved than that because there are a couple hundred pieces and there is a lot of custom fitting you have to do, but it really isn't bad. What I want to touch on, though, is that there are some problems with the instructions and provide a few hints that'll help you get around those. With these hints, before long, you'll be turning a box like this into an airplane like this. I haven't painted this one because I built this mostly for my grandchildren and I wanted them to be able to see the structure. It's kind of nice. This is a rubber band powered version. These models can be adapted very easily for either a small gas powered motor or even one of the new electric motors. So let's get into some of the details of how you can make one of these and provide some hints for how to make it easier. Two incredible improvements in these balsa and tissue paper airplanes in the last few years are that the plans are now laser cut. They used to be cut like a cheap puzzle. They'd have a plate with an intricate pattern of blades laid out on it. It would come down on a piece of balsa wood and cut its way through. The result was that many times sharp corners like this and this and this would get crushed down and broken off. With the laser cutting, you have none of that. So that's a big advantage. Another thing is the blades wouldn't always cut cleanly, whereas the laser actually leaves a slight kerf or gap between the pieces, so they break out very easy. And another nice thing is that the laser cuts are perfectly flat on this face, whereas the knife-produced stencils would have crushed edges that would reduce the surface area in contact with the mating piece, so you wouldn't get as strong a joint. Another advantage are the new instant glues, which you can snap your model together, and the pieces are so accurate now that you can just sort of piece it together and they'll hold together all by themselves. Then you just go on and put a drop of glue on each joint and you're done. So these two things have made these models much better than they used to be. Sadly, one thing that hasn't changed are the instructions. To save a little bit of effort, they make a generic line drawing of how the aircraft will go together, which doesn't fit all of the plans. And what they say in the instructions are, use this as a guideline and use the photograph of the framework as to address any specific questions of how it goes together. That sounds good, but the problem is this photograph is probably 70 years old and it is such a low resolution image and the contrast is so soft that you can't see a lot of the details you need to clarify what they want you to do here. Now, written on here, it's copyright 1961. I don't think it's been changed in all of those years. So that's the first problem, is that the illustrations are not as good as they should be for a structure that's as complicated as this. Almost as bad are the written instructions. To save words, many times they use truncated instructions which don't clearly define exactly what you have to do. What I recommend is reading through all of them twice, putting your model together with the balsa wood pieces, and then reading it again before you start gluing the thing together. This will help prevent gluing things together, which turn out to be wrong. You'll be using a lot of pins to hold various parts in place while they dry, so I recommend using a piece of 1/2 inch thick foam board, which will hold the pins well and provides enough area to lay out your pattern on. Now what I did is I sprayed it lightly with some spray cement and then laid my patterns down on this, and then on top of that I put layers of wax paper, making sure that the waxed side is up, and that helps prevent the glues from sticking to it. Now the new instant glues are so strong in their adhesive qualities that they'll stick even to the wax paper, the waxed side of the wax paper. So when you do your joints, make sure you do just enough to dampen each joint and not enough so that it flows down onto the wax paper. You'll save yourself a lot of grief later. If you do have like an airplane wing here is stuck to the wax paper, rather than trying to pull it up like this, which could break it, take a knife and slide it underneath the edges, underneath the wing, and that'll help pop it up at a small angle and you won't break your wing. And speaking of wings, I'd like to point out one mistake, either with the plans or with the wood that's supplied. And that is with this last rib on the inside edge of each wing. And the problem is this piece of wood stops right at this line, and there is a cutout on this rib section that is supposed to have the wood extend onto it, so that underneath it, so that it has something to glue to. All of these ribs have a little keyway cut out so that they fit on top of this main strut here and can be glued to it. That section is missing. The wood stops right there. So what I had to do is take a piece of scrap wood, cut a piece here, and glue it to this so that this rib had something to glue onto. And I had to do that for both sides. Now, the angle here isn't a mistake. The wing needs to be at this angle because the fuselage has a slight angle, and the wing inside needs to have the opposite angle so that the wings hang straight on the body of the airplane. Another problem concerns the rudder and stabilizer adaptation if you want to make this a controllable glider, like you're putting a motor on it and you need to be able to adjust these with your radio control system. What they show, without explaining it, is a dotted line where you're supposed to cut the stabilizer and rudder, insert a hinge of some type here, and then attach this with wires to your control system. It's impossible. These little fill pieces are only 1/16 of an inch wide. You couldn't possibly get a good cut here. What you actually have to do is add double pieces, one above, one below, above and below, and on both sides here, replacing each one of these with 2 pieces with a slight gap there. That's the only way you could adapt these to being controllable. It never explains what type of hinge to use here. So this is a big problem because without this, you can't do an RC modification, and yet they pretty much just completely ignore the difficulties of doing that. If you're an experienced builder, no problem. If you're a first-time builder and you're trusting the plans, big problem. Another problem is the template used to cut out the windscreen that fits under the airplane like this and is supposed to protect the pilot. Now, the problem is if you cut it to this plan, one of two things is going to happen. If you cut it full width here, this piece, which covers the front, isn't wide enough to cover the whole front. You've got a gap there. So you make one on this side, one on this side, and you're going to have two seams right here and a double thickness here, which is going to look really bad. Another problem is that this piece is about 3 times as long as it needs to be. It only needs to be that long. Also, if you cut it along the center line, you're still going to have a seam up the middle, which isn't going to look right and isn't going to be very strong. What I did to avoid seams and have a cleaner line on the windshield is I used this template to create a one-piece template that would wrap all the way around the cockpit. I made these slightly wider and longer than is indicated here, so that I had lots of room, lots of material that I could trim to fit, so that I made sure that I had good surface contact. I found that as long as the plastic is in good contact with the wood, that this instant glue worked very well at adhering the plastic to the wood, which was nice. When you're laying your paper over your surfaces, use lots of tape on the margins to pull the paper as tight as possible. For flat surfaces where you have good contact already, I found that I could just lay the paper on dry and using a thin instant glue, just lay a very light bead around it and it will soak through the paper into the balsa and gives a pretty good seal. Other areas that are more complex, I use a basic wood glue, and sometimes I'll thin it down 50-50 with water, sometimes I'll use it straight. It seems to work fine either way. When doing the ends of the wings, if you try to use a long piece of paper here and then get it to curve over this end here, you're going to end up with wrinkles. So what I do is cover this up to this rib, and then I cover this section with a separate piece of paper, which lets me lay it more accurately over the angle, and I get a much smoother finish to the wingtips. Once the glue is dry, use a fine spritzer, and you just barely need to dampen the paper. It doesn't need to be soaking wet, and in fact that will make it take longer to dry. And it's really kind of fascinating to watch it dry and see the paper shrink up. I sprayed mine with a simple transparent glossy sealer. This is Design Master. I got it from Michael's. It's a little expensive, but it worked really good. And you can use just about any spray. I advise not using the classic dope. There are fumes problems with that, and it's not really necessary. Even vinyl spray paint will work fine. Once it's done, the tissue paper, for all of its delicacy, takes on a almost magical sheen. It's drum tight, and it's really quite attractive just to look at, even if you haven't painted it with colors. Once the airplane's together, the single hardest job is to get the rubber band stretched down the end to where it can be secured. The hole in the front and back here through which it has to go is only about 1/4 inch in diameter. It's very tough. What I did is I took a piece of dowel, cut a notch in it, and then stretched the rubber band over the notch so that the notch was exposed. Then I inserted it down through the body, and when I could see the notch, I used a bamboo skewer and I stuck the pointed end through so that it got through the notch and out the other side. There's a hole here for receiving a dowel like that. Once that was secure, I was able to release the rubber band, pull this out, and then using a pair of wire cutters, cut the dowel off flat on each side and secure it with a piece of masking tape. You don't want to glue this in place, the holding dowel, because if and when the rubber band breaks, you need to be able to replace it, so you're going to need to be able to remove that dowel. Although I haven't done it, one thing I would recommend doing is getting rid of these wheels. The instructions say to protect the airplane that you want to do your first test flights out on a grassy field because the grass provides a soft cushion for it to land it. The problem is these wheels are so small that they're going to hit the grass and dig in, and you're going to do a nose up like this, and you run the risk of a catastrophic stop. Even if it's flying well, that can break the airplane. What I would do if I was going to rebuild this again is make long skids that come out front so that as it lands, it has a large surface for it to slide across the ground. I think that would work a lot better than these little tiny wheels. If you read the instructions for trimming the aircraft by moving the rudder left and right or the stabilizer up and down to get it to flight properly, they say, and this is almost a quote, bend the stabilizer or the rudder, like this, until it has enough curvature to produce the flight characteristics you want. You do that, it's going to break. I'm sorry. That is just completely wrong. Unless this has been made with the hinge, as I spoke of earlier, you can't bend these things and control it without breaking them. So what I did is I glued the rudder to the stabilizer, and then I glued that to a piece of a very thin metal wire. Then I glued that wire to the fuselage. Now it doesn't look good, but what that lets me do is bend the wire right there so that I can adjust the rudder back and forth or the stabilizer up and down to get the sort of trim I need without running the risk of trying to bend these and break them. This is a controversial suggestion because it goes against the plans, and it does ruin the look of the plane a little bit. But I'd much rather have something like this that allows me to adjust the trim very accurately without running the risk of breaking the structure. To make sure that I had enough meat on the framework for this, I actually glued two small scrap pieces to the main center spar. So I hope those few suggestions helps you if you decide to build one of these. And in spite of my complaints, I'd say, go ahead and try it. This is a lot of fun. And speaking of fun, let's take it outside and see how she goes.